Good afternoon. My name is Katie Starkey, and I will be presenting on the Cromwell Electronics case analysis for leadership and teamwork class in the MBA program. First, let's talk about some background in the case and Cromwell Electronics. It is a new marketing unit in the Eastern region. That is the surrounding topic for the case. It has a new manager. His name is Ed Corelli, and he's been in the management position for about 10 months. He has 6 total subordinates, 2 of which are long-term employees, and the other 4 are new hires. For the long-term employees, at least one of them has been working for that company for 10 years. The tasks required by the unit include marketing presentations, advertising campaigns, and promotion of sales of the Cromwell Electronic products. Now, an important note from the case is that Ed was promoted based on good reputation as a marketing specialist. So, our analysis that we can infer from this information is that Ed has no prior management experience, meaning that he may have been a good marketer and had skills in that area, but his leadership might be lacking. His experience as a manager is a total of 10 months, which is the time that he's been in this position. So, going into that, we can talk about some of the key issues that are surrounding in the case and maybe some of the things that Ed could improve on in order to address these issues. So what's the problem? Ed is getting feedback from his vice president, Dan Dalton, that his unit has very low performance compared to the other unit, its partner, that was started around the same time frame. Dan is curious as to why the unit is performing not to expectations of the company, as Ed is looking at the motivation and drive of his employees. So when Dan discusses Ed's management style with his employees, we've noticed that he gets conflicting feedback on Ed's management style. The long-term employees are providing positive feedback. For example, Pat, who has been working for the company for nearly 10 years, says that Ed is a great manager, provides plenty of freedom and availability for him to do the projects the way that he sees fit. Now, the new hires, which are providing negative feedback on Ed's management style from the majority, so we're looking at 3 of the 4 new hires agree on the same issues, saying that they lack some direction from Ed, and that although he offers a lot of freedom, he doesn't tend to tell them when they're doing something wrong, tell them exactly what he expects, and when they need help, tends to put the question more on them as to how they would address the situation rather than giving them some direction. From this, Ed has inferred that these employees lack drive and motivation, and that is why the unit is performing poorly. So we come to the case questions. We must evaluate Ed's behavior as a manager and what actions are effective and ineffective. The second question is, what should Dan do to address the issue? So Dan, being the vice president, has seen Ed and has gotten this feedback and is now wondering how he can follow up. Ed does not realize what he's doing wrong. But in order for there to be a success in the branch, there must be a change, as there is low performance now. So to continue in the way that it is would only mean continued low performance. So we must try to address these issues and provide the proper strategies in order to improve. So let's look at Ed's management style. First, we have autonomy and freedom. So he allows his employees the freedom to decide their own methods, deadlines, and strategies to complete the necessary projects. So we notice that this is very important for employee growth, that they need to be able to take ownership and responsibility of the projects that are given them. If they're constantly being monitored or not allowed to learn themselves, then they typically don't have the skills on their own unless they are being constantly directed. So what we can infer from this, the analysis, is this typically means very little direction or involvement from the manager. So if the manager is offering absolute autonomy, it typically means that he is allowing the employees complete freedom and creative sort of license to the projects that they are given. This could mean deadlines, how they like to approach it, the methods they'd like to use. It's all up to them. Second, we'll talk about his conflict style, which from the case can be inferred that it is avoiding, which is typically when the manager negates the interests of both parties to prevent conflict or tension. So as we can see from Katie's response, who is a new hire, she says Ed likes to pretend that mistakes will go away if you don't talk about them. So this can be not only his not providing that sort of negative feedback when they do something wrong, but also when things are going wrong, or maybe there is conflict between peers, that he chooses not to address it. This could be in order to try to create a positive environment, or to not attack those situations as he needs to because of the fear of conflict, or possibly his perception of his own leadership ability, and maybe not knowing if he has the correct sort of strategies to deal with those things. But what this does is not only create a sort of positive environment on the surface, but there's also no sense of power or authority from the manager as a leader. So when we look at the employees looking to leadership to solve these issues, they cannot count on the manager if there hasn't been any record in the past of him solving these situations. And lastly, we'll look at positive feedback only. So he does let the employees know what they're doing when they're doing a good job or complete a task well. However, he doesn't provide feedback when there is an issue or employees make a mistake. So this can be good and bad in the unit. What's effective? So kind of going into those three management styles, what works? He allows autonomy. So he understands the importance of autonomy, which allows his team to grow, take responsibility and ownership. He provides positive reinforcement for good work, and he creates a sort of peaceful environment. So on the surface, we can see that everybody enjoys their job. There doesn't tend to be any tension or arguing or disputes on projects. However, this could be typically from not the actual nature of the environment, but what Ed is choosing to address and not addressing, depending on the seniority of the people that work for him. So what's ineffective? He can't motivate new employees. There is no training. Dependence on speciality. So we can look at, in the case, Ed typically consults his veteran employees more than his new hires, and they're also given more difficult tasks to complete. According to Ed, this is not necessarily true, but his new hires have said that he shows a sense of favoritism towards the more veteran employees, which could come from him being new to a leadership position and maybe not necessarily confident in his abilities, but also his dependence on knowing that the veterans will do exactly what they've been trained to do for many years and will continue their successes as they have been in the past. Therefore, we'll go into the last 2 points, which is there's a lack of direction. This can come from his autonomy as well. And there's no sense of power, authority, or control. So there's no conflict management because of his avoiding style. Let's look at the key topics and the analysis of these subjects and what Ed can incorporate into his management style and his leadership characteristics. So we can look at motivating others. He talks about in the case how his new employees tend to lack motivation or drive. Now, this could be from their motivation, or it could be from their ability if we look at performance equals ability times motivation. Now, if we look deeply into the case, we can see that the new employees do address Ed and want to know what they need to do. So there is a bit of desire there when they're wanting to complete tasks, and they tend to ask Ed for questions. They ask him how to do these things. They ask him what he expects or what they should be doing correctly, or how to do certain things. So I don't know that the problem is necessarily motivation, but probably ability. So we can see that they're hungry for growth, and they've noticed favoritism towards the veterans, and they're not receiving the same level of attention. So they want that training, but they're just not getting it. And that can come from the autonomy as well. So there's a lack of Ed taking the time to invest in his new employees and train them the proper methods that the veterans may know themselves over years of experience. We can also see that there may there is no present goal setting in the case, which can also cause problems with new employees having direction or drive in their jobs. Motivation leads to performance, which leads to rewards, which leads to satisfaction. Obviously, the new hires are not satisfied with Ed, so therefore there's a gap somewhere in this chain. The manager must set goals in order to spark motivation, and so if Ed continues to just let his longtime employees continue to do what they're doing and not giving some new innovative plans for his newer hires, then it's going to continue to be where the veterans are doing all the work and the new hires don't know what they're doing at all. So the manager must set goals. They must buy into it completely as a team. They have to be specific. So therefore, we're seeing a lack in Ed's being direct on what he expects. They need to be consistent and appropriately challenging. As Ed mentioned, he does give challenging assignments to the new employees, but if they do not know how to do them, then there's not going to be success within completing those tasks. He also needs to provide feedback on accomplishments, both positive and negative. We can look at leader involvement and reinforcement. So he's typically all reward and no discipline. There's no help provided, and he's not analyzing how he can help in the process. So if we were to look at this, we typically see all reward from Ed, and he reinforces exceptional behavior. However, he does not discipline or reprimand. So we completely lose this side of the spectrum. Therefore, employees can't connect what's acceptable to what's exceptional. They just see this, but they don't see this, and they don't see how to get from one to the other. All right, and next we're in conflict management. So he has an avoiding conflict style, which means he negates the interests of both parties. Although this would be good for veterans because they already typically know how to fix their mistakes or they don't make them, new hires have no idea what expectations are or their standards. And so when they make a mistake, they don't know if this is good or bad, which cannot allow them to grow in the right direction. Note, this sounds like a leader that doesn't want to do the hard jobs, meaning that he's new to leadership. And maybe conflict management isn't exactly something he's comfortable with yet. But he must understand that conflict is inevitable and should be addressed and never ignored. So what should Dan do? Follow up, motivating others. He needs to inspire Ed to train new employees, maybe have the veterans teach the new hires, and have a coaching and investment system. Come up with a mandatory on-ramp orientation training for the new hires. Involve the entire team in decision making. Follow the resupply, retrain, refit, reassign. Don't just assume that all new employees don't have drive. Goal setting. Have SMART goals. Be specific, measurable, aligned, realistic, and time-bound, which it doesn't seem like in the case that he's following any of these rules. And also, Dan can teach Ed to empower, which means articulating a vision, modeling correct behavior, providing support, which he hasn't been doing, providing necessary information, which he doesn't seem to be doing, only counting on the new employees to try to figure it out themselves. And leader involvement. Don't just reward, but discipline too. Employees need to know when they have done something wrong, and they need to be able to connect what is wrong and what is right. And he needs to ask employees how they may be assisted. Instead of just asking, how would you do it? He would say, well, how may I help you? Where are you having trouble? How much help do you need from me in order to learn? These are the type of things that Ed could say to improve. And his conflict management. He needs to use a variety of styles and establish authority and trust. Not just avoid all conflict, but know when to be forcing, when to be accommodating, and when to see both sides and try to have that sort of win-win situation. He needs to have the necessary conversations in order to promote respect. And effective leaders must be able to manage conflict. In order to control the storming phase of team building, which is going to happen, they need to know how to channel this sort of energy. So in conclusion, we talked about Ed's management style and major issues present in the branch, the motivation, goal setting, and conflict avoiding. What does he do well? Positive reinforcement, autonomy. He understands that importance and he wants a peaceful environment. But what can he improve? Incorporate a training program, have SMART goals, empower employees, and know when to discipline. Address what's wrong. So I want to thank you for my presentation today and listening to the case analysis, and my references are from the Developing Management Styles textbook from chapter 6, 7, 8, and 9. Thank you so much.